Hi, my name is Etza Castillo, and this will be my research proposal slide presentation for my Asian American Family Studies 121. For my introduction, I will show about my research topic about Asian immigration in the United States. There are a lot of American history points when it comes to immigration in general, but there are also points when it comes to Asian American immigration specifically. They've been targeted for as long as this country has been active, and it's very important to know about all those details, and immigration history in America always matters. The problem statement is that Asians are one of the many minority races targeted during any sense of immigration, anti-immigration mandates here in America. There are countless examples. One of the many examples here included is the Chinese Exclusion Act. That law was passed in 1882 and prevented any Chinese people from entering into the United States. And although it stated for just Chinese individuals, oftentimes it was stretched to just Asian immigrants in general, regardless if they were Chinese or not. Another major target would be Angel Island. As stated in one of the articles, U.S. immigration policies treated individuals differently. Immigration regulation on Angel Island also varied, sometimes dramatically, across groups. From Lee 2012. Unlike Ellis Island, the Asian immigrants were racially targeted, especially Chinese immigrants, but also Vietnamese, Malaysian, sometimes even Japanese. And speaking of Japanese immigrants, during World War II, after the Pearl Harbor attacks, the U.S. decided to put Japanese Americans in internment camps. And when the U.S. entered World War II, because of the Pearl Harbor attacks, many Japanese Americans were put in internment camps and suffered from guilt by association, Fieri 2025. And the reason why they were put in the camps is to contact all spies. But we all know the majority wasn't really for spies, it was just for racial discrimination. And although many of the laws in the past have been outlawed or overridden, doesn't mean the racism against Asian American immigrants have been conquered. Referring to the background, there's a lot of information from, again, the major 3 points I'm bringing here today being Chinese Exclusion Act, the Angel Island, and the Japanese internment camps. Connecting that to my family oral interview with my sister, she talked a lot about the comparisons between both Angel Island and Japanese internment camps, as she has read throughout those pieces of history. The parallels, she reads, the parallels between Angel Island detention and Japanese American internment are stark. As in, the differences are, although the methods of differences are different, detention camps and internment camps, the goal is still the same in mind. and both are obviously important to history. Lee, 2012. With America, racism will always prevail, and it is our job as a citizen to target against that. Connecting that to Brenner's ecological system, the American macro system is what keeps Asians and other minority races in racial confines. Even nowadays, with ICE, targeting plenty of immigrants, Asian American immigrants are no exception to that hatred and discrimination. For my literature review, my small scale literature review is pretty much where a lot of my points come from, and a lot of the points in this review are somewhat repeated, but I digress. One of the biggest points I pulled from one of the articles I read from the literature review is that 60% of all Asian Americans in the United States are immigrants and share the foreign rises over 70% among adult Asian Americans. From within the text, Bootyman and Riz 2021, but from the whole article, Carter 2025. Regardless of what racist people and racist mindsets want to state, immigrants are what make up the country. This country was born by immigrants and it is made by immigrants. And another quote from Orchowski, 2015, might have butchered that pronunciation. 50 years after the passage of the law that changed the face of America, immigration reform suddenly becomes one of the hottest political issues of the times in the media and the political arena, which is very true. Immigration these days, especially with all the ICE raids happening recently, are still a very prominent issue that needs to be addressed and tackled. For the research methods I aimed for both qualitative and quantitative. The reason being is in quantitative, I pulled a lot of articles, most of the ones from the literature review, and expanded upon it, read more throughout them, read more pages than what was intended. And qualitative, as in doing more research than what was necessary to quantify the amount of Asian American immigration discrimination here in America, and qualitative as in discovering that rich yet saddening history of Asian American immigration discrimination. For my analysis, there's a lot to be talked about. I've already discussed a lot about the big three in Asian American immigration discrimination, but another quote by Luo 2025: by the early 20th century, hundreds of Chinese students were on American campuses. As in referring to the Chinese Exclusion Act, they were barred from entering the U.S., but there were just a couple of exceptions. One of the biggest one being immigrant students, anyone pursuing an education, just like nowadays with the Dreamer Act. And another lesser talked about case referring to Angel Island. A lot of people tend to forget that the whole institution actually didn't close down formally. Referring to Lee 2024, the fire closed down the immigration station on Angel Island, and the site reverted to the U.S. Army on February 4th, 1941. A fire destroyed a lot of the Angel Island facility and they were forced to close it down. It's not even that they chose to close it down, which tells you a lot about how the American immigration powers really think about immigrants in general, including Asian American immigrants. Again, the significance is very important to see how Asians were treated throughout American history. Again, a strong point coming from the internment camps throughout its records of hate crimes against Asian Americans date as far back as the 1800s, and anti-Japanese movements did not begin with reactions to Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, sung 2022, and even post-World War II. In 1952, the McCarran-Walter Immigration and Nationality Act passed in Congress over President Truman's veto, retained national origins quota, but abolished the universal Asiatic exclusion as such, or Chomsky 2015, which basically goes to show how even after the victory of World War II, the American government still kept targeting immigrants. They still kept going at them, regardless of any current victories from any major wars, being World War II, when the Allies beat the Axis powers. Basically, the conclusion for my research topic is how important Asian American history is in the United States. Again, I took most of this from my small-scale literature review and some points from my family oral interview. Asian American immigrants have been through a lot of discrimination throughout American history. The three biggest examples I mentioned were the Chinese Exclusion Act, Angel Island, and the Japanese internment camps. With immigration being especially a very hot topic these days, it's absolutely important to know the troubles Asian American immigrants went through here in the U.S. from its inception back in 1776 to nowadays in 2026. 250 years, and America has still yet to fully conquer racism, and in this case, against Asian American immigrants. And these are my references for my research slides proposal. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation.